Hello guys, in this video I will be teaching you the basic setup for the pyro explosion. We are right where we left off in the last video. I just cleaned up the scene a bit, put the destruction in one box, and only viewing this, which is the destruction that I've cashed out. So let's get started. First, put down a new geonode. Call it pyro source. Jump inside. Put down a sphere. Change this into polygons. Turn up the frequency. Next, put down a transform. Turn on the moving tool. Press space F to focus. Escape from the colors. Slowly move it into position. As you guys can see, the sphere is too big, so we want to scale it down. Scale down the sphere. Try to position it better. Okay, this looks good. So what I'd like to do is do different varieties on the sphere, like put a layer of noise to it, make it more textury, because if we leave the sphere with its basic round shape, the explosion is not going to look interesting. It's gonna be really symmetrical, and it is gonna be very hard to get a lot of breakup. So one of the ways is I put down a mountaintop. And what this does, as you guys can see, is make the sphere more textury, more rocky. You can adjust this, but obviously it's not working, so we need to bring down the element size, bring up the height. And what I'd like to do is change the noise type, so I figured this one works best, sparse convolution, and play around with the other settings a little bit. Okay. Next, I'll put down a subdivide. Just to get a more clean look, because as you can see, it's smoother. You can add the depth of it, so just turn it up even more, and it gives you a smooth finish off. You can even layer the noises or the mountaintop or whatever, so you can put another one down, but be careful as it likes to explode like this. So I usually switch it to Perlin, and I slowly adjust the parameters, so get it somewhere that I like. maybe like that. Just a bit different, but up to you guys. It's not gonna affect it a lot, but I like to experiment. So the next thing I like to do is put down a transform node. And maybe rotate it into place. So get your viewing tool, but it's nowhere to be seen. We have to center the pivot. So go here, type $CEX, press tab to move on to the next column. $CEY, press tab, $CEZ. And now it's center. So we can just rotate it a bit. Move it around. I even like to scale it a bit, so what I do is just Control C, just stretch it over there or the Y direction to get it in a more interesting look. Maybe make the mountain higher or drop down the element size. You can see what it does. You can middle mouse drag to slowly shift the values. Maybe less. Maybe even scale it down since I think it's too big now. So scale it down a bit, push it in. Okay. Next, I am going to put down a clip. What this does is clip your geometry. So let's say I push it up a bit. As you can see, it's cutting it in half. So I wouldn't want the spikes to go to the bottom because I don't want it to push down from the bottom. So I like to clip it. Next, if I do use the clip, I put down a polyfill usually. What this does is fill the bottom hole, but it can't fill when it's in this mode, so I switch it to triangles and it fills the geometry. Okay, looking good. Of course, you guys can just rotate it a bit if it's not tilted enough. Push it down and you have your source. But obviously this is not the only way to build your source. You guys can have fun with it. You can experiment with different shapes. it doesn't have to start off from a sphere. You guys can even build your own shape and just have fun with it. Next, we need to bring in the ship's animation, so this will follow along with the ship. So we go up first. We go to a node that has our animation, which is this one. So Control C, Control V, plug it in, and it is following along with the ship. Maybe push it there. Yeah, looks good. Now we would like some normals on this, but first let's just put down a scatter. We need these points for the pyro source because it's sourcing from points, so you can turn it up a bit as a start, or maybe a bit more. I switched this off to get more variation, more breakup, so it's not so uniform as you can see. So turn off relax iterations if you guys want. Okay, we are going to do our normals and velocity. So type v at v, which is velocity, equals to, use the set function, put a bracket, and you guys don't have to read this, but what it does is basically one of the functions is set your value in x, y, and z. So if I say 0 in x, 1 in y, 0 in z, close it, and put an ending onto it, it's going to point this down. The point trails pointing down is perfectly normal. It's pointing the opposite direction, so in reality this is actually going up, so it's fine. And we are going to set our normals after this. So logically we have our v value, right? So we can say at normals is equals to v at v. So what I mean by this line is we are making the normal value always the same as the velocity value. So if you see, these are our normals. Yeah, display normals right there, which is the same with our point trails, and they are pointing up. If you guys wanna have a little tilt to it, I think you can vary this up a bit like this, so it tilts to that direction, which is the explosion direction. Yeah, so that's pretty good for a start. And now we are going to manually build our pyro source. Sure, you guys can click on the shelf tool, but I wouldn't recommend that, because if you click on the shelf tool, Houdini does this thing where it sets everything up for you in the values that will work. So what I mean by this is Houdini will give you the values already, but you don't know what values it's giving you basically. So the pyro can turn out way more unoptimized, or the bounding box is going to be extremely huge because Houdini sets it up for you. So I like my sims to be in control, and therefore I am setting it up manually. And I am going to teach you guys now. So the first thing we need for a pyro is obviously a pyro source. And you go here at the initialize source fuel, right? You change it to source smoke, because Houdini has this tiny bug that these won't appear unless you switch it back. So you switch it back to source fuel and you got density, temperature, and fuel. Moving on, I like to put an attribute noise. What this does is, as you can see from color, the color attribute, it gives noise to your scatter pattern. So we don't need color, we just delete that. Instead, we are going to use the attributes that are here, which is density, temperature, and fuel. So we are going to put it in density, temperature, and fuel. And what this does is vary up the patterns of the density, temperature, and fuel, as what a noise does in general. The next step is we are going to rasterize the attributes. So we put down a volume rasterize attributes. But we see nothing there at first. This is normal because we have to put in the attributes. So we put in, again, density, temperature, and fuel. And that is your source. So it's a bit cloudy thing right now, and it's very boxy. To pull out the details from this, you can turn down the voxel size and play with coverage scale as well as particle scale. Particle scale does the most effect, which is shrinking it way down. You can even go to the pyro source, and yeah, you can turn this down too. So, but it doesn't really give a lot of effect. It's not as dense as I would like it to be, so I am going to turn up the particle amount, maybe a bit more. Okay. Turn on velocity blur. So what this does is reduce stepping in your pyro. So if your pyro is moving very fast, if you guys have done a pyro sim before, if the pyro is moving very fast, you usually see a lot of stepping, and the way to get rid of those steppings is velocity blur. So we just keep this on. Next, put down an out fuel, null out, and call it out fuel. So and we have our source set up. It's not that difficult, but you guys can adjust even more and as much as you like, of course. We are going to put in a .NET and call it Pyro 1. It's a good habit to name your .NET and organize everything neatly so you guys know what you are working on and which node. Because once the node graphs get very big, it's gonna get very confusing. Put down a Pyro solver. We are going to use the normal one for now, not the sparse Pyro solver. And the basics of this is putting down a smoke object, which is this fuel, and putting down a volume source. This node points to where the fuel is, so this is the node that asks where is the fuel located, which is in this subpath that you have to point it to. So we are going to bring in our out fuel, which is there. And again, it has this bug where the fields don't appear, so switch this to source fuel and it gives you fuel, temperature, and velocity. What I like to do is add another attribute. You can by clicking on the plus of the operations and typing in density in your source volume and density in the target field. Since we already rasterized the density, we might as well use it, so I'll just bring it in also. Okay, next step is putting in a gas rasterize. I mean gas resize fluid dynamic. So with this is your bounding box, and in the max bounds you want to uncheck clamp to maximum. If this is on, this will stay in the middle and this won't move to your source, which is over here. And we like to help point it towards the source that we custom built. So we go here and there's this node called the bound node. I like to put it down, you can put it down here. What it does is bounds the thing that you inserted to. In this case is the fuel, and you get this box. So you can put a null, call it out, capitalize it, outbounds. Go back to your .NET, maybe switch this here and turn this off for a moment. Go here to your gas resize fluid dynamic and go to your tracking object by track by object, and you put in your outbounds. And one more thing that I'm supposed to do is go to this, I think, yeah, go to this creation tab and click on solve on creation frame. Can move and see your bounding box snaps to the your outbounds, and because you uncheck this, it's going to immediately move the next frame towards your fuel source. It's very thin, as you guys can see. Yeah. This is still pretty fast, so you guys can go back to the properties and turn this down. What the division size is, it's basically your resolution. So the lower this is, the more resolution you have in your pyro. But keep in mind, do not turn this down very low at a very fast rate, because the lower your division size, it will change the look of your pyro. So for instance, you have your division size at 0.08, for example, in your sim, and then you say, okay, I like the explosion. But if you turn it down to a very high resolution, like 0.02, it's going to change the look of your sim, and your explosion is not going to look the same. So just keep in mind and turn this down little by little as you continue tweaking your pyro. Okay. It's too thin in my opinion, so go to the volume source and scale up the density. Maybe by a lot. Okay, it's slightly better. Okay, we don't want to visualize it from this dot network, so we are going to put down a geometry and call this pyro visualization, or just pyro vis to make it short. Put down a DOP import fields and the DOP network, obviously point it to your pyro 1, which is your simulation, your DOPnet. Copy, paste it, put a slash. For the DOP node, you want to point it to your smoke, which is the smoke object. So type in smoke object. Okay, this is set, so choose the presets, which is pyro, and you have all these attributes. Put down a volume visualization. Display here. You can turn off the display in your DOPnet now. Put in your density fields, which is, just put in density for now. And emission, you can play around with these. You can switch it to temperature. And you can try heat for the color. But you guys, of course, you can try density or temperature or whatever. So just experiment with it. Let's see what it looks like first. It's very, very thin. So we want to turn up the density scale. Higher, maybe. Okay. Turn up the emission. Now you guys can see that it gets very, very dense. What volume visualization does is just to help you visualize the pyro in the scene view. It does not have anything to do with your render or your shaders. So you guys can just put a random color in it. And for example, let's just say I put in red, orange, and yellow. Emission color range, put this to 1 and 7, or maybe turn it down to get it a more variety of colors. And for the emit range, you can also put it 1 to 7, or you guys can try anything, or let's revert this to defaults. Let's just put 7. Okay, it's very dark, so turn this up so you get more breakup in this. The resolution is very low, so you guys can turn this up. As for the smoke, you see what it does. This is just purely to visualize, so it's fine if it doesn't look like what you want in the render. Okay, let's say I want this for a start, which is extremely low res. It is fine because we have got this set up already. Another thing is, since the destruction starts at frame 21, I think, or yeah, 20, but it starts bending at 21, so we can go to the pyro tab, and in this start frame we put it as 20, give an extra 1 frame delay. So you see at frame 20 there's no pyro yet, but oh, there you go, haven't switched it on, sorry. At frame 21 the pyro is going to start. You can see it appears right when the destruction starts, but of course we need to adjust the speed and everything, so for now it's still out of sync. But yeah, this is the basic setup for the pyro. In the next lesson, we are going to be research and developing the behavior and the timing of the pyro to match the destruction seamlessly.